They called her untouchable, a judge with no weakness. But the moment her eyes met mine, I realized even power can blush. The first time I saw her, the air in the courtroom felt different, charged, like the quiet before a storm. The high ceiling swallowed every sound, and beams of afternoon sunlight cut across the polished wooden benches, settling like a spotlight on the woman who commanded the room. She sat at the bench with her shoulders straight, her black robe framing her presence like armor, her hair pinned back in a way that revealed both elegance and restraint. She was 42, though you would never know it by the sharpness of her eyes or the confidence in her posture. I was 26, fresh in my role as an intern, fumbling through files and feeling too small for the grandeur of the place. My job was to assist the clerks, carry documents, keep order in the background. I wasn't supposed to draw attention, and I certainly wasn't supposed to notice her the way I did. But I couldn't help it. There was something about the way she spoke, measured, calm, each word wrapped in authority that left no room for doubt. Yet, even in that commanding tone, I caught glimpses of humanity. A soft sigh when she leaned back in her chair between hearings. The faintest trace of a smile when a lawyer stumbled over words. A small adjustment of her glasses as she read, the subtle curve of her hand moving with quiet grace. These weren't the moments written in transcripts or echoed in verdicts, they were small, private details that most people overlooked. But I saw them. And maybe that was what struck me the most. I didn't just see a judge, I saw a woman. One who carried responsibility heavier than her robe could show, one who balanced strength with the quiet vulnerability of being human beneath it all. I tried not to stare, but every time my gaze drifted back, I found myself caught in her orbit. When she looked up from the bench, her eyes swept the courtroom, calm and steady. For a brief second, they landed on me. I froze, heart thudding so loudly I was sure the stenographer could hear it. She didn't linger, didn't break her professional composure, but in that flicker of acknowledgement, something shifted in me. It wasn't love, not yet. It wasn't even attraction in the way I knew it before. It was curiosity, mixed with awe, tied with an unspoken respect. And beneath it all, a question I didn't dare say aloud: what would it feel like to be the reason that composed woman lost her balance, even for just a second? The courtroom had emptied for the day, its echoes fading into silence as doors shut and heels clicked against marble floors. I lingered longer than I should have, gathering stray files and stacking folders in neat piles, trying to look busy while secretly hoping for a glimpse of her again. And then it happened. I stepped into the long hallway just as she was leaving her chambers. The space stretched wide, dim light filtering through tall windows, shadows painting the walls with muted gold. She walked with a quiet poise, her robe removed now, replaced by a tailored gray suit that seemed to soften her edges without stripping away her authority. For the first time, she didn't look like the judge. She looked like a woman, elegant, composed, and surprisingly human. When she noticed me balancing a stack of files, her steps slowed. She tilted her head, studying me in that measured way of hers, and then she spoke. "Thank you," she said. Her voice, no longer amplified by the bench, was gentler here. Warm. The paperwork today was heavy. You handled it well. For a moment, I forgot how to speak. My throat tightened, and all I could manage was a quiet, "I'm just trying not to mess anything up." I gave a nervous smile, the kind that betrayed inexperience, and hoped it didn't make me look foolish. To my surprise, she smiled back. A small, almost reluctant curve of her lips, as if she hadn't planned to let it happen but couldn't quite stop it. The sight alone felt like a victory, though I dared not call it that. "You remind me of myself when I started," she said, her gaze softening. Careful, cautious. Wanting to do everything perfectly. It fades with time. Her words carried weight, the kind that came from years of experience. But beneath the professionalism, there was something else, a flicker of kindness she didn't often reveal. I felt it like a secret being shared. I wanted to respond with something clever, something that might hold her attention, but instead I found myself simply saying, if it fades, maybe I'll try to hold on to it a little longer. She paused, her eyes meeting mine. The silence stretched, filled only by the echo of footsteps from someone passing far behind us. For that heartbeat of time, it felt as though the hallway belonged only to us. Her smile deepened just slightly, though she quickly turned it into a polite nod. That might not be such a bad thing. She walked on, her heels clicking against the floor, her figure retreating toward the tall glass doors at the end of the hall. But something lingered in the space between us, something fragile and unspoken. For the first time, I realized she wasn't untouchable. She wasn't just a figure draped in authority. She was a woman who, for reasons I didn't yet understand, had chosen to let me see a softer shade of her. And in that fleeting exchange, something began, a spark, delicate and dangerous, like fire waiting for air. Her chambers were quieter than the courtroom, almost too quiet. The overhead lights were off, replaced by a single desk lamp that cast a soft amber glow across papers and leather-bound files. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the window, the rhythm steady, grounding, almost intimate. She had asked me to stay behind, to help organize an old case file. At first, I thought nothing of it, it was work, after all. But as I set down my stack of documents and took the chair across from her, I realized this was different. The room felt warmer, more personal. Less like a workplace and more like a retreat she rarely let anyone enter. She leaned forward, her elbows resting lightly on the desk, her hands folded as she scanned a page. I noticed how her hair, usually pinned with precise care, had loosened slightly, a strand falling against her cheek. She brushed it back absently, the movement unguarded. For a while, we spoke of legal details, the kind of conversation that stayed firmly within boundaries. But gradually, her voice slowed, softened. She sighed, setting the papers aside. "You know," she said quietly, "this job takes more than people realize. Everyone thinks it's just decisions and rulings, but it's lonely, sometimes." Her words surprised me. She wasn't speaking as a judge now, but as a woman admitting something raw. I felt a heaviness in her tone, the kind of honesty that doesn't escape easily. I didn't rush to respond. Instead, I let the silence stretch just enough to show I was listening, not filling the space with platitudes. Finally, I said, "It must feel like you carry the weight of everything, but no one's there to share it." Her eyes lifted to mine, and in them I saw something fragile, a quiet relief at being understood. She gave the faintest nod. "Yes. Exactly that." The rain outside grew heavier, blurring the windowpane. In the glow of the lamp, her face looked softer, younger, touched by shadows and light. I wanted to reach across the desk, to take her hand, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I leaned closer, my voice steady. "You're not as alone as you think." The words hung between us, simple but weighty. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable, until finally, a small smile broke through, not the practiced smile of a judge, but the tender smile of a woman who, just for a moment, felt seen. And in that quiet chamber, with the rain as our only witness, something shifted between us. The distance wasn't gone, but it was smaller now. And so was her loneliness. The next time we met outside the courtroom, it wasn't in marble halls or behind stacks of files. It was at a small cafe just around the corner from the courthouse, early in the morning before hearings began. I had arrived early, mostly to steady my nerves with coffee, when I saw her step inside. The bell above the door chimed, and for a moment, the room seemed to quiet. She wore a cream-colored blouse beneath a tailored navy coat, her hair down this time, falling loosely over her shoulders. The sight of her outside her robe, outside the authority of the bench, startled me in the best way. It made her seem reachable. Human. She scanned the cafe, her eyes landing on me at a corner table. I stood quickly, almost too quickly, and offered a hesitant smile. To my surprise, she walked over. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her tone light but carrying that same steadiness I always admired. Of course, I said, pulling out the chair across from me. My hands felt clumsy, my voice steadier than I expected. The minutes that followed felt like stolen time. We spoke about work at first, safe territory. But then, gradually, the conversation softened into things beyond the courtroom, her love of early mornings, how she found peace in reading poetry, the quiet joy she took in watching the city wake. I listened intently, fascinated by the small details that painted her as more than her title. She laughed once, unexpectedly, at something I said. It wasn't loud, but it was warm, and it reached her eyes in a way I hadn't seen before. That laugh felt like a gift, one she didn't hand out often. And then it happened. As she lifted her cup, a drop of coffee slipped onto her hand. Without thinking, I reached across the table, brushing it away with my thumb before handing her a napkin. The movement was instinctive, but the silence that followed made me realize what I'd done. Her eyes met mine, steady, searching. For a second, neither of us moved. The air between us grew heavier, charged, the noise of the cafe fading into the background. Her lips parted as though to say something, but she didn't. Instead, she smiled faintly, small, knowing, a smile that acknowledged the line we had almost crossed. We returned to our conversation as if nothing had happened, but everything had changed. That single touch lingered longer than words, carving its own memory into the space between us. And though neither of us said it aloud, we both knew the rules had just been bent. The courtroom was never meant for secrets. Every corner carried echoes, every movement magnified by the silence of order. And yet, in that crowded room filled with lawyers, clerks, and restless citizens waiting their turn, there was a secret threading itself between us, delicate, invisible, and undeniable. She entered from the side door, her robe flowing as it always did, her face set into that calm authority I had come to admire. But today, I wasn't just another set of eyes watching her preside. I was a man holding on to the memory of a touch, the brush of my thumb against her hand in a cafe where the world hadn't been watching. As I sorted files and handed documents to the clerk, I caught myself glancing up at her more than I should have. Once, twice, too many times. And every time, I told myself to stop. But then it happened, her gaze found mine. It was brief, only a flicker in the middle of proceedings, but it froze me in place. Her eyes lingered a fraction longer than necessary before she looked down at her notes. My chest tightened, as though the air itself had grown heavier. The room buzzed with routine, lawyers debating, pens scratching against paper, the hum of whispers. No one noticed the undercurrent but us. To everyone else, she was the judge, untouchable, focused on the law. To me, in that instant, she was the woman who had laughed softly over coffee, the woman who had allowed silence to stretch between us like a promise. Later, as I handed a document across the bench, our fingers brushed, barely, almost imperceptibly. But the contact sent a jolt through me. Her expression didn't falter, but her hand hesitated just a second too long before withdrawing. It was maddening, this pull. To the world, we were nothing more than two professionals sharing the same space. But beneath that, an entire storm raged, every look, every pause, every moment of closeness igniting something neither of us dared to name. When the session ended, the courtroom filled with shuffling feet and murmurs. I kept my head down, focusing on gathering papers, but I felt her presence like gravity itself. As she rose to leave, her eyes flicked toward me once more. A glance so quick it could have been overlooked, but to me it said everything. I feel this too. The unspoken connection weighed heavier with each passing day. We hadn't crossed a line yet, but the line was blurring, bending beneath the weight of everything left unsaid. And in that silence, I realized, sometimes the loudest confessions aren't spoken at all. They're carried in a look, a hesitation, the electric space between two people who know that by the time the hearings ended that day, the sun was already sinking, spilling gold across the courthouse steps. The city around us was alive, traffic humming, voices echoing down the street, neon signs flickering to life. Yet for me, the world had narrowed to one figure standing at the top of the stairs, waiting. She wasn't rushing to her car or buried in her phone like everyone else. She was just, there. Still, poised, as though she'd made a decision she wasn't sure she wanted to admit to. Her navy coat fluttered in the evening breeze, and when her eyes lifted to find me among the crowd, I knew instantly this wasn't chance. She had waited for me. I slowed my steps as I reached her, careful, almost hesitant. "Long day," I offered, my voice lower than usual, carrying more meaning than the words themselves. A soft laugh slipped past her lips, the kind that sounded unpracticed, almost nervous. "Every day is a long day," she said, then added after a pause, "but tonight feels heavier." There was something in her tone that pulled me closer, something unguarded. We stood shoulder to shoulder at the top of the steps, watching the blur of headlights below. The silence between us was no longer awkward, it was charged, alive, humming with everything we couldn't say out loud. After a moment, she turned to me, her expression softer than I'd ever seen it. "You make me nervous," she admitted quietly, her voice barely audible over the sound of the city. "And I don't get nervous easily." Her words caught me off guard, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. This was the woman who commanded a courtroom, who silenced lawyers with a single look, admitting to something as fragile as nerves. My heart tightened with equal parts awe and fear, fear of what it meant, and awe that she trusted me enough to say it. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I simply let it settle, standing close enough that our arms brushed lightly when the wind shifted. The touch was nothing, barely there, but it felt like everything. "Finally," I said softly, "I could say the same about you." Her eyes flicked to mine, searching, as though to test if I meant it. When she saw that I did, her lips curved into the faintest smile, a smile that wasn't her judge's mask, nor the polite curve she gave to strangers. This was different. This was hers. She looked away quickly, hiding it, but I had already seen it. And I knew then, the barrier between us had cracked. Not broken entirely, but cracked enough for the truth to seep through. As we walked down the courthouse steps together, the night felt different, like we were carrying a secret neither of us had chosen, but neither of us wanted to put down. Her chambers felt different that night. The heavy blinds were drawn against the world outside, the usual clutter of case files pushed aside to make space on the desk. A soft golden glow spilled from the lamp, casting warm shadows that softened the hard lines of the room. For the first time, it didn't feel like an office. It felt safe. Private. I stood near the window, listening to the faint whistle of the wind outside, while she poured tea into 2 porcelain cups. It was such a simple act, something ordinary, almost domestic, but in her presence, it carried weight. A judge who spent her days commanding a courtroom was now carefully setting a cup in front of me, her hand lingering just a moment longer than necessary on the saucer. She sat across from me, but unlike the countless times we'd faced each other across a desk of files, this time there was no barrier of formality. Only the quiet, and the truth pressing against it. "I shouldn't have asked you here like this," she said finally, her voice steady but softer than usual. "If anyone knew, if anyone misunderstood," she trailed off, her eyes lowering to the rim of her cup. "It could ruin everything." I heard the conflict in her words, the tug-of-war between duty and desire. For a moment, I wondered if I should ease her burden, stand up, walk away before the line between us blurred beyond repair. But then I saw it, the faintest tremor in her hand as she set the cup down. And I realized this wasn't just about risk. It was about fear. Fear of losing something she hadn't even let herself name yet. Leaning forward, I kept my voice low. "I respect what you've built. I know how much it matters. But I also know what I feel when I'm around you, and I can't pretend it's nothing." Her eyes lifted, meeting mine with a raw honesty I hadn't seen before. The mask she wore in court, the steel, the certainty, was gone. In its place was a woman who had spent years hiding behind authority, suddenly stripped of it. She reached across the desk, hesitating for only a breath before her fingers brushed against mine. The touch was light, tentative, but when I didn't pull away, her hand settled fully into mine. "You've made me do something I swore I wouldn't," she whispered, a smile breaking through the uncertainty. "You've made me blush." The words were playful, but beneath them was a truth neither of us could deny anymore. I squeezed her hand gently, my chest tightening with something that felt dangerously close to relief. For a long moment, we simply sat there, her hand in mine, the silence between us carrying more weight than any confession could. The storm of doubts, the fear of judgment, all faded into the background. What remained was something fragile, yes, but also something real. And as I looked at her across that desk, I knew this wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning.